Yo, Microstrategy is about to be included in the $26 trillion Nasdaq 100 in just 2 days. This means that trillions of dollars will now be buying MicroStrategy by proxy whenever they want to buy a piece of the QQQ. This is because of something called passive investing. Does this inclusion into the Nasdaq 100 end any potential shorts on MicroStrategy and blow up billions of dollars of MicroStrategy stock price? I don't know. We'll see. But we're going to get into what the Nasdaq 100 is, what is about to happen in the next 2 days. And I also think anything that's good for MSTR, I think is good for Bitcoin. I think it goes kind of goes both ways because of the amount of Bitcoin that MSTR holds. Joining me today, we have Dr. Bitcoin in the house, and of course, my legendary co-host, always optimistic, Optimus Fields. So let's just jump straight into the news. So first, what is the Nasdaq 100? The Nasdaq 100 is a stock market index made up of equity securities issued by 100 of the largest non-financial companies listed on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. It goes on to say, here's the breaking news: MicroStrategy expected to be added to the Nasdaq 100, according to Bloomberg. The official announcement is likely coming this Friday. Now, what are some of the reasons? What are some of the potential benefits of being on the Nasdaq 100? Number one, prestige and credibility. Inclusion signals that the company is among the largest and most successful non-financial companies listed on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Number two, increased visibility. Companies in the Nasdaq 100 gain attention from investors, analysts, and media, enhancing their public profile. Number three, attracts investments. Many index funds and ETFs track the Nasdaq 100, resulting in automatic investment from these funds, which can boost the company's stock price and liquidity. Number four, validation of growth. Inclusion reflects strong financial performance, market capitalization, and growth potential. Number five, investor confidence. Being part of the Nasdaq 100 can reassure investors of the company's stability and prominence in its industry. Number six, the Nasdaq 100 is widely followed internationally, offering companies exposure to global investors. I think the part that I really want to focus on specifically is the automatic investment from funds, right? So a lot of people that perhaps aren't familiar with Bitcoin, aren't comfortable getting exposure to Bitcoin, they see this and they're like, wait a second, they're just buying the Nasdaq 100, the QQQQ, and they're getting exposure to Bitcoin whether they realize it or not. And then this kind of goes down the something that we've talked about for many months now, this idea of the game theory, the idea of incentives, right? All of a sudden, if MicroStrategy is included in the Nasdaq 100, all of a sudden Bitcoin starts to become a part of people's everyday portfolios, whether they like it or not. So their incentives are going to be aligned with number go up. They're going to be more against any type of anti-Bitcoin regulation because that potentially could affect their bags. This is what we're talking about when we talk about aligned incentives and when we talk about the game theory. And once you understand the game theory of Bitcoin and the aligned incentives of Bitcoin, you inevitably come to the realization that Bitcoin is going to win. So anyways, an article by our boy Nick Hoffman from Bitcoin Magazine. Today, Bloomberg ETF analyst Eric Balkunas and James Seyfarth announced that MicroStrategy is expected to enter into the Nasdaq 100 later this month on December 23rd. Quote, MicroStrategy will likely enter the Nasdaq 100 index on December 23rd, and we expect net buying of at least 2.1 billion in shares by ETFs to flow, equal to about 20% of daily volume. Quote, joining the S&P 500 will be tougher because of a lack of profit, though an accounting rule change surrounding Bitcoin valuations could make MicroStrategy eligible in 2025. Net buying of 2.1 billion would be an added boost to MSTR, which has already outperformed most major stocks and also Bitcoin this year, up 450% year to date at the time of writing. Microstrategy, powered by its relentless Bitcoin acquisition strategy, has seen its stocks skyrocket to new all-time high this year for the first time since March 10th, 2000. MicroStrategy has already acquired 170,000 Bitcoin since announcing its plan to raise $42 billion to purchase more BTC in late October. Balkuna stated that the official announcement of MSTR getting added to QQQ is expected to come this Friday, December 13th. Quote, again, this is our best estimate of what will go down, but Kunis concluded, we don't work at Nasdaq, FYI. So we're hearing different information. Some people are saying that it's coming this Friday. Some people are saying that it's coming December 23rd. But regardless, I think this is a massive win for MicroStrategy. And just to kind of give you guys something that we covered earlier on this year, central banks of Norway and Switzerland disclose massive MicroStrategy holdings. So they all have indirect exposure to Bitcoin. A lot of companies, and actually Saylor explained this when he went on Legacy Financial Media, the reason that a lot of companies and individuals and institutions are buying MicroStrategy instead of spot Bitcoin or the ETFs is because they legally cannot do so, but they still want exposure to Bitcoin. And the way that they do it is by buying MicroStrategy. Now, the fact that MicroStrategy is going to be added into the Nasdaq 100, which is going to be massive, because like I said in the beginning of the show, it's going to allow this kind of like passive investing by people that they just want something safe and steady. They're not betting on individual companies. They want something sure. They want something stable. And by MicroStrategy being added into that index of those top 100 companies, a lot of people are going to be getting indirect exposure to Bitcoin, whether they like it or not. So Bitcoin is continuing to kind of creep into the global financial system, and when and if MicroStrategy is added into the S&P 500, that trend is just going to continue. It's actually going to accelerate, right? So this is the legitimization of Bitcoin as an asset. This is the legitimization of Bitcoin as a strategy for companies, as an alternative to cash. And I think the stock's performance this year is an indication of how successful that strategy has been. So anyways, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Bitcoin. Dr. Bitcoin has been in the scene for quite a while. If you guys have been on Bitcoin Twitter, he goes by the name, I have to get his X account right or else I'm going to butcher. He goes by the name of Dr. Bitcoin MD on X. If you guys are part of the Bitcoin X community, you know who this man is. And he's in a suit. I was just as surprised. I had to check his verification. I had to ask for his ID and social security number. So I did KYC him. I checked his identity. He is who he says he is. Dr. Bitcoin MD, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. It was a very thorough search. I'm very impressed with your KYC AML abilities, man.
Yeah, I wouldn't have let you come on the show without a thorough KYC. That's just totally part of Bitcoin culture and what we're all about here at Simply Bitcoin. That's a bad dad joke, by the way. But anyways,
users don't know this, but Nico tested me by forcing me to post 5 different shit posts about different topics and testing to see if it really fit the criteria for, Dr. Bitcoin MD posts.
100%. So, man, what's your take on this? You are wearing a suit, so I'm assuming you're going to give us a really good perspective on MicroStrategy being added to the Nasdaq 100. Apparently, this is a huge deal. I had my father-in-law texting me about it, telling me that I was like, "Oh my God, this is huge." So, what's your perspective on this? The things that stand out to me while I was doing research about this morning was this idea of people getting, by just passively investing, they're getting indirect exposure to Bitcoin, right? And I really believe that's a one-way street, right? Like once you open that door, you don't go back just because of the returns, just because of number go up technology. So what's your take on MicroStrategy being added to the Nasdaq 100 later on this month?
I think it's just another check on the progress for Bitcoin. We've crossed the Rubicon now where Bitcoin has entered the center stage for all sorts of different bubbles that are now coalescing around this topic. So just last year at Bitcoin Nashville, we had the now president-elect give a speech on Bitcoin, and RFK Jr. also give a speech on Bitcoin. So it's definitely in the world of politics. Now we're seeing it in the corporate world cross a different threshold as well, specifically with MicroStrategy. I think what Saylor is doing now is going to be looked at in history books 100, 200, 500 years from now. People will talk about the gall, the gumption to do what he's done, considering the position he was in, and to execute with fearlessness and courage and conviction. What he's done is put Bitcoin into the hands of people that would have never interacted with it in the first place, both in terms of eyeballs, but also their wallets. People like my grandparents, my uncles and aunts who have always pushed against holding Bitcoin itself. They might have been interested when a Bitcoin ETF came about, but now they don't even have to think about it in some sense because they have tons of index funds. And the same is true of institutions that hold a lot of index funds. So we crossed the Rubicon here where it's a one-way door. There's no turning back here. And this is something that we've all been thinking about for a while. If you've been on Bitcoin Twitter for a while, we've been talking about these days in a theoretical sense, like, oh, one day this might happen. We might have a speculative attack on the dollar because X, Y, and Z might happen. And it's playing out exactly like we imagined, and even better in some sense, because you have someone like Michael Saylor who has a reputation, a standing in that corporate world, leading the charge. And I think that has been a lightning rod for a lot of the corporate and institutional adoption. And you're only going to see that continue because once MicroStrategy finds success taking that route, which they clearly have, once they make it into a top 500, top 100 companies, and other companies that are sitting on large cash reserves are looking over to see what they're doing, you better bet there are going to be copycats. And once there are copycats, there's just a flood into Bitcoin, and the flywheel is in effect. There's no stopping it.
100%. I 100% agree with your perspective, right? This is unstoppable. The train is, you better get on the train or you get left behind. It's as simple as that. Everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. I think Microsoft's decision yesterday was an incorrect one. I think they're going to regret it a couple years from now, and they're going to end up buying Bitcoin at a much higher price. So yeah, I 100% agree. I think, this trend is going to continue. I still see I perceive, I could always be wrong, but I perceive that we still have many, many months of bull market left. And it's going to be extremely exciting for MicroStrategy shareholders, Bitcoin owners, people that have Bitcoin in self-custody. So I think this party in 2025 is going to be awesome. And one of the things that I tweeted out this morning is the returns in 2016 were 125%. The returns for 2024 so far have been 125%. The returns in 2017, which was the year after the halving, which was historically when Bitcoin tends to perform the best, was 20x in 2017. Now, am I saying we're going to get a 20x in 2025? I don't think so, and that would be insane and melt faces if it does. But the law of big numbers comes into play. It's a lot harder to move as Bitcoin continues to grow in market cap. However, I am getting 2016 vibes. I am getting 2017 vibes. I'm not getting 2020, 2021 vibes. And I think a lot of people still have PTSD from that bull market of 2021, because a lot of people were let down. A lot of people had higher expectations. What I see the general consensus within the Bitcoin community now is we have lower expectations. So with all the positive things going on, whether it's the institutional acceptance and adoption of Bitcoin, the regulatory environment, 40x lightning goes, whether it's the regulatory environment, I played you guys a video of the president-elect's son talking about the importance of Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin different on yesterday's video. You have the president wishing Bitcoin happy birthday, congratulating Bitcoiners on 100K. We're gonna read you guys an article today where part of the president's goal is to get Bitcoin to 150K earlier on in his administration. Like, that is nuts. That is gnarly. Like, you couldn't imagine that in a million years. So you have all these things falling together, the nation state adoption as well. You had Russia announce that they're looking into making Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset. And we're heading into the year after the halving year, which tends to be the parabola year. So I think things are going to get crazy. I think things are going to get wild. And Bitcoin tends to do the exact opposite of what everybody is expecting it to do. And of course, starting in 2025, me and Opti will start wearing suits moving forward as Bitcoin continues to become mainstream, and we start to have to become, financial analysts and stuff. And we'll wear ties and suits and, all that stuff. What do you think, Opti?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. My mom would be really happy with me wearing a suit, probably.
Bro,
so yeah, I'm okay with that.
It would be super legit. It would be super legit.
Yeah, well, people would take us more legit.
Are we going down the Andrew Tate route? And,
no, we're not going to get fitted suits. We're going to get
but those aren't just fitted suits.
We're going to get classic draping suits.
Those are like extremely fitted suits, bro.
Yeah. Anyways, enough of enough of fashion talk here. My take on this, I think the real signal here is, and I've been saying this, and I mean, it does feel kind of harsh when I say it, but I think even Saylor would say it himself, that MicroStrategy was kind of like a zombie company until he adopted Bitcoin. If you guys looked at his stock, he was part of the internet bubble, the early 2000s stock bubble, and then it crashed and went absolutely sideways and was pretty much dead in regards to stock price. And then he started to, research Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has been freaking rocket fuel for its stock. And now he's been putting on a masterclass for everyone else to kind of follow suit. It's still interesting that no one is following Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy strategy yet, although we are hearing a lot of rumbling. Well, actually, let me take that back. We have seen some people follow, but we haven't seen the top corporations in the world follow. And obviously these conversations are happening right now. And I think MicroStrategy being added to the QQQ, top 100 Nasdaq companies, I think that is one of those defining moments of Bitcoin maturing and the Bitcoin HODL strategy being a successful strategy. And now everyone is going to have to take notice. Literally, MicroStrategy got to the QQQ just because of the flywheel of adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. Now everyone has to take that seriously. And then the second point is kind of what Doc and you were saying, Nico, is now anyone that has exposure to an index fund has indirect exposure to Bitcoin. And I think more people are going, and then first of all, it would be very interesting if we could get fact checked on how many people actually do have exposure to the QQQ. And then that's, a stepping stone into more people adopting Bitcoin. Obviously, this is kind of just a transitory step, I guess, a baby step into Bitcoin. It's a
Trojan horse, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the part. That's the part of where it got my attention the most, right? Which is the Trojan horse aspect of it is fascinating to me, right? The kind of passive investing, it's you can imagine that there's people that have a negative outlook on Bitcoin, but you can bet that they have exposure to the QQQ, or you can bet that they have exposure to the Nasdaq 100. Well, bro, you have exposure to Bitcoin now, whether you realize it or not. So it's kind of like this Trojan horse, and it's further legitimizing Bitcoin in the eyes of institutional investors. And it's further, increasing the prestige and the credibility of MicroStrategy, which is like, let's be honest, guys, which is essentially acting like a Bitcoin index fund because of the quantity of Bitcoin that they hold. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a massive deal, and if they're able to get on the S&P 500, that's another massive deal as well. Because again, how many people have exposure to the S&P 500, right? Like how many people have exposure to just these index funds? You know, they want that safe return of 6-8% a year, and now they have exposure to Bitcoin. Like that to me is absolutely crazy. Now, to be fair, is this real exposure to Bitcoin? No. This is simply Bitcoin. Real exposure to Bitcoin is spot Bitcoin in self-custody. However, like Opti was saying earlier, it does function like kind of like a Trojan horse, right? It gets your foot in the door. It gets you asking questions. If you're starting to benefit from number go up technology, you're going to start to ask questions on what it is that you're holding. We all came here for the money, right? And anyone that tells you otherwise is like maybe that 1% of people are telling you the truth. But the vast majority of people that got into Bitcoin, they came here for the money, but we have a very famous saying in the industry. It's like, we came for the money, we stayed for the revolution, right? So I do believe it's a step in the right direction for MicroStrategy, for Bitcoin, for the industry as a whole, and the further legitimization of Bitcoin as an asset in the eyes of these massive institutions and nation states alike, right? So it's very exciting stuff. Anyways, guys, before we start the show, I do want to give a very special shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack, bitcoinwell.com. Enable your independence with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin on-chain or via Lightning in Canada and the USA. To get started, you go to bitcoinwell.com, you put in your email address, takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up. And what makes BitcoinWell different than all the other exchanges is that it is a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com today. Also, if you're a higher net worth individual and you're looking to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more, check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC. This is a white glove service tailored for people who are looking to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more. If you're tired of dealing with Coinbase, if you're tired of dealing with UI and your robots and terrible support, and you want to deal with a human being which will hold your hand through the buying and selling of Bitcoin and any questions you might have of Bitcoin, you have to check out the Bitcoin Well Infinite product, which just released. To get started, again, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC, or you could personally email me at nico@bitcoinwell.com. Also, when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn Bitcoin Well points, and you could redeem those points towards the Bitcoin Wishing Well contest. Get your Lightning wallets ready. First person to scan the QR code has won 2,100 sats today. When you sign up to Bitcoin Well, you can use promo code SimplyBTC and you'll get 3 tosses into the Bitcoin Wishing Well. All right, everybody, let's get to the numbers. We have tons to talk about. Let's check it out.
I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not. allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on StampSeed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to StampSeed.
All right, everybody, store your seed words properly. Don't write down your seed words on paper, which is prone to water damage, fire damage. You want to stamp your seed onto one of the strongest metals on planet Earth, onto titanium. Use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store. Guys, I want to give a shout out to the 1,874 of you guys watching live between YouTube, Rumble, and X. We're almost at 550 live viewers on YouTube. So guys, if you guys are enjoying the show, help us break 200 likes within the first 45 minutes of the show. Smash that like button. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $360. Block height, 874,283. Sats per dollar, under 1,000, 996. Market cap, 1.99 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 10.56%. Percentage issued, 94.26%. Decline from all-time high, negative 3.3%. Realized monetary inflation, 1.1%. At 1.16%. In the grand scheme of things, we are just getting started. Anyways, Roger Ver went on Tucker Carlson tonight, yesterday. We have the clip for you guys, about a 3-minute clip of the entire interview. Now, Roger Ver is a very unpopular figure within the Bitcoin community. Obviously, this is one of the people that push Bitcoin Cash hard, and he attacked a lot of Bitcoiners for not getting behind Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash would have been a terrible idea to increase the block the block size, because if you increase the block size, you increase the barrier to entry for people running nodes. And if you increase the barrier to entry, making it more expensive, that means less nodes. Less nodes means less decentralization. Less decentralization is bad for Bitcoin. What makes Bitcoin different and unique compared to all the other cryptocurrencies is its decentralization. So leave Bitcoin as is. Don't touch it. I'm a big fan of ossification. Maybe you'll hate me for that, but that's where I kind of stand on things. Don't fix what ain't broken. And obviously, Bitcoin ain't broken. So anyways, yeah, Roger Ver, very unpopular figure for doing that, for pushing Bitcoin Cash, wrecking a lot of people in the process. We all know how that ended. Clearly, Bitcoin, the OG Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin, the Bitcoin was the winner of the fork wars. But if you lived through the fork wars, it wasn't so certain at the time. Why? The Bitcoin Cash hash rate, they artificially, because Jihan Wu was the original founder of Bitmain, which was one of the, and still is, one of the largest ASIC manufacturers in the world. And between him and Roger, they had a tremendous amount of Bitcoin. And what they were able to do is that they were able to artificially not only pump the price of Bitcoin Cash as it relates to Bitcoin, but also increase the hash rate artificially of the Bitcoin Cash network, to the point that there was 2 times during the fork wars that the hash rate of Bitcoin Cash overtook the hash rate of Bitcoin. Meaning that there was a short period of time, and this was all artificially, now we know this in hindsight, but there was a point in time where 2 or 3 times where the Bitcoin Cash hash rate was higher than Bitcoin's, meaning that the Bitcoin Cash was theoretically more computationally secure than Bitcoin. You can make an argument that it theoretically had a higher value proposition at the time. Now we know that was all bullshit. They did that artificially. They pumped the price artificially. They pumped the hash rate artificially, and they burned a ton of Bitcoin in the process doing all of this, right? And both Jihan and Roger, I'm sure, have a lot of less Bitcoin today than they would have had if they just would have stuck to Bitcoin. Anyways, all that being said, I had to give a giant preface. There are some interesting things that were talked about during the interview that Roger had with Tucker Carlson. And one of those things that they were talking about, which is something that we covered on Simply, and I believe this is part of the Operation Choke Point 2.0 that we just lived through for the last 3.5 years, that forced the hands of Bitcoiners to get behind the Republican Party and Trump, because I don't think Bitcoiners would have gone in political if we weren't forced to. But Roger Ver was one of the people that were targeted. And essentially what happened was that he gave up his U.S. citizenship back in 2014. And he was just charged, it was like this year, for essentially not paying taxes on some of the taxes that he owed from that era. Which, like, if you think about it, like, essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to make an example out of Roger, and because they see the writing on the wall, and they're saying, like, listen, it doesn't matter whether you give up your U.S. citizenship. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. We can find you, and we will put you in a box if you don't pay your taxes. It doesn't matter whether you give up your citizenship or not. And this just kind of reminds me of the theory from the book, The Sovereign Individual, right? And they make that theory in that book. They make the case that essentially what you're going to start to see is you're going to start to see a mass exodus of people leaving countries that don't have favorable tax jurisdiction, or they don't have favorable business regulation, because it's so easy to do so in the information age, right? You can literally just pick up your laptop and go. If you're taking self-custody, you can bring your wealth with you and you can go to another country that treats you best. We saw a little like example of that during the pandemic, where you had a mass exodus of people leaving New York and California going to Texas and Florida. You see a lot of people in Europe leaving Europe going to Dubai, where Dubai has zero capital gains tax. And you see a lot of these European countries react with trying to implement an exit tax, you know, and they're trying to stop people from leaving, right? So I believe that part of the motivation from the US government to go after Roger is to make an example out of him and say, listen, it doesn't matter whether you gave up your citizenship 10 years ago. It doesn't matter even if you're not in the United States. It doesn't even matter if your businesses are not in the United States. We will make we can get you if we want to, right? Now, I'm not trying to justify anything that Roger did. I'm not very familiar with the case. But I believe that it was politically motivated after everything we've seen, you know, over the last 3.5 years. Anyways, guys, so here's a clip from the interview. I'm not going to play the entire thing, but let's check it out.
You are being extradited from Spain, an ally in Western Europe, a NATO country, to the United States by the U.S. Justice Department to face life in prison, 109 years, for tax evasion. You're not a U.S. citizen. The period that you're being charged with evading American taxes, you are not a U.S. citizen. And so whenever I see a story that says the U.S. government is extraditing somebody for tax evasion to put him in prison for 109 years, my first thought is maybe it's not really about the taxes. Maybe there's something more to this story. Could there be another reason the U.S. government is angry at you and wants to put you in prison for the rest of your life?
Yeah, to be honest, I think they're not really angry about taxes at all. I think they're just angry about my lack of obedience and lack of, kissing their ring. I was the first person in the entire world to start investing in the Bitcoin ecosystem and investing in businesses that made it easy for people to use Bitcoin as money and as cash for people all over the world. And I was promoting it since 2011 as, hey, stop using the US dollar, stop using euros, stop using yen, start using Bitcoin. We have an alternative in which each individual anywhere on the planet can be in charge of their own money completely without needing permission from any politician or any government anywhere in the world. And when you're a government that loves controlling people through the control of the money supply, that's very, very threatening to their control of the world. So, of course, they didn't like that at all. And I knew that this sort of thing was dangerous. And I thought the safest path for me would be to not be a U.S. citizen. So in 2014, I renounced my U.S. citizenship and became a citizen of the world effectively. But my new nationality is St. Kitts, which is a wonderful little island in the Caribbean. And I thought that would be safe for me, and I could promote Bitcoin from there and obey. Even though I may disagree with plenty of laws, I do my best to obey them, because I know when you're advocating for things that change the world, governments don't like that and they can come after you. So I told all my tax attorneys and everybody else, we have to do everything perfect so that there's no room for the US government to give me a hard time about any of this. And more than a decade after I had already renounced my US citizenship And just a couple of weeks after I published a book on the hijacking of Bitcoin, how it no longer works as peer-to-peer cash for the world, and it's been morphed into something that's just a digital asset that people are speculating on the price on, rather than something that can compete with the US dollar and the euro and the yen for use as currency around the world. Suddenly, right after my book gets published, that exposes how people claiming to work for intelligence agencies hijacked Bitcoin to do that. Suddenly, I get arrested and tossed in jail in Spain and trying to be extradited to face more than 100 years in prison. I'm 45 today. I think my odds of being alive with conventional technology in 109 years from now aren't looking too good. So effectively, to die in prison is what they want, because they're so upset about the things I've been saying and the way.
All right, I'm going to leave it at that. And, there's a lot of things that I don't agree with Roger on as a Bitcoiner. But I will say this, I'm starting to see a pattern. Okay. We had CZ arrested. We had Arthur Hayes arrested. We had Roger Ver arrested. You had privacy developers arrested. Simultaneously, you have banks like TD Bank that just got a record fine for the amount of money that they laundered, and there was no one arrested. Their executive team was not arrested. We just lived through Operation Choke Point 2.0, and more things continue to come to light. And me and Opti were concerned at various points, just because we are a Bitcoin media business and we are a Bitcoin business based out of the United States. And I, as much as I disagree with Roger on a variety of things, like his opinion on, Bitcoin Cash and scaling and all that stuff, I believe the arrest of Roger Ver was politically motivated. I mean, if it just happened by itself, I would say no, this is one thing. But the fact that it all happened around the time that CZ was arrested, around the time the Samurai guys were arrested, around the time the Tornado Cash guys were arrested, the fact that it was happening all around that same time tells me that it was sending a message more than anything else. Now, that being said, I don't know the specifics of the case. I don't have a law or a tax background. I don't know what they're claiming or what he did. But here you have another example of essentially this guy potentially serving his entire life in prison. And then this is one of the guys that was promoting Bitcoin in the very early days. And I do agree with Roger in the sense that, yes, there are some things that Bitcoin is going to be very unpopular with governments, for sure. I 100% agree with that. The way that he explained it in the beginning, the reality is that governments get a tremendous amount of, we have Dr. Jack Cruz in the chat. By the way, you should definitely check out his keynote, which we posted on X from Adopting Bitcoin. Dr. Cruz says, these prosecutions remind me of exactly what happened with the Chicago 8 when Ramsey Hunt and Jordan Mitchell changed the DOJ rules in 1968 and 1969. Yeah, so, I mean, again, I may disagree with Roger, but as a Bitcoiner, I'm not a fan of Bitcoiners getting arrested, right? I'm just not a fan of it. And why is it that our industry continues to get targeted and the traditional financial industry gets fines? Why the double standard? That is the exact opposite of what justice is supposed. It's like the equal laws of justice. The lady has a blindfold and she's holding a scale. It's supposed to be fair. That scale is like going, like the scale that has the fiat on it, it's just like tipping to one side. Like, it's bullshit. So anyways, that's my take on this, is that I think that this is politically motivated. He could have done, I don't know what the details of the case are, like I said, but look at all the things that they did with the various banks, right? With Operation Choke Point 2.0, how they specifically told banks to stop onboarding quote unquote crypto businesses. And this was all done opaquely. We were not supposed to hear about this, right? So like, the attack from Elizabeth Warren, capitalizing on the tragedy that happened in Israel, and then basically using the legacy media to try to convince the American people that terrorists were using Bitcoin to launder money. And then it was discovered that the vast majority of money laundering is done doing the traditional financial system. But that didn't stop the FinCEN from introducing even more laws and regulations to kind of go after the industry. So maybe they're right about what Roger did. After what I've lived through as a Bitcoiner, as someone who owns a business in the industry over the last 3.5 years, forgive me if I don't believe you. That's where I'm at right now personally. So anyways, Dr. Bitcoin, you've been in this industry just as long as we have, man, maybe if not longer. Roger has done some very unpopular things within the Bitcoin community. But at the same time, I'm looking at this and I can't help but to think this is, this is criminally motivated. I mean, this is politically motivated.
So there's a couple points to touch on here. I actually think it's a delicate topic that's worth expanding on here. First and foremost, I do think when you deal with nascent technologies and networks, whether it was the internet of the 90s and prior or Bitcoin now, there's usually a lag when it comes to regulation. It takes regulatory bodies a while to figure out what exactly they're dealing with and how best to deal with it. And part of it is reasonable in their mind for things like investor protections and trying to make sure people are just not outright frauding and scamming people. So trying to steelman their side of things, that's what they're attempting to do. Now, in reality, what happens is regulatory bodies end up putting a giant blanket over an entire industry, and they start taking a scattergun approach where you don't know when the next domino is going to fall and who it's going to be. And we're all just kind of waiting and we're surprised at who it is. And we don't really understand why they.
Did we? Oh,
Did we lose them?
Yeah, we might have dropped. Anyway, Dr.
What are the rules and
Dr. Bitcoin? You were in the matrix for a little bit. All right, let's keep.
I'll hit him in the private chat.
Yeah, let's keep rolling it. We'll figure out. This is a live show after all, guys. Opti, what's your take on Roger, man? I know he's a very divisive figure within the Bitcoin community. There's a lot of things that he did that were not popular with the community, and rightly so. But two things could be true at the same exact time. Now, again, I don't know the exact details of the case. However, I am not blind, and I kind of do see a little bit of a double standard between how they treat people in the traditional finance. No banker went to jail for what happened in 2008, bro. Okay. And that was one of the crimes of the century, in my opinion, in terms of the amount of damage that caused society. And then our industry, whether it's Ross Ulbricht or, Roger Ver or, other people, it seems like it's kind of like, let's lock them in a box and lock away the key, bro, no matter what it is. Like, we'll find something, we'll find a crime, right? So I don't know the details of the case. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have that background. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I'm not stupid and I see a pattern here. So Opti, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, well, with the caveat that you just said, I'm just a dude in a hoodie on YouTube, so I do not have the background to really unpack everything. But I think considering the context of when this prosecution came down, I think it's very obvious that it is political. We were covering it all of this year, rather, and when it happened, we got to remember how heated things were getting in the US. That was when we were really talking about, well, Nico is really saying it all the time, like we might have to leave the US. And at that point, it did very scary for a lot of us Bitcoiners in the US. We all know now in hindsight that Operation Choke Point 2.0 was a real thing, that they have been trying to stop the adoption of Bitcoin. And it's very obviously politically motivated. They tried to make an example of Roger Ver. I don't really like Roger Ver. I came in after the block size wars, like a month or so after. So I really can only look backwards. I don't really know, the whole story, or rather I didn't experience it in real time. But I think it's very clear now that Bcash is trash. And with that being said, though, I still think that it is politically motivated. And look, I don't want to be in Roger's shoes, and it's very obvious that they are trying to make an example out of him. And so it is very interesting where we are right now, especially considering that we are seemingly going to get a more pro-Bitcoin administration in the US. So hopefully we get some tailwinds on us.
Like, not to be specific, right? Because I'm not like, this isn't the point of Simply. And now that the election is over, we're gonna like completely just go away from politics. But like, didn't a specific person just get pardoned, and like for tax stuff and stuff like that? Like, like again, like. What bothers me is not the law, or because if the law is the law, like the law is the law. What bothers me is that like there's two systems of justice, and then that's not law, right? That's not a legal system. That's a hierarchy, right? That's like feudalism, dude. It's like rules for thee, but not for me. We're gonna get to make the rules. And then we're going to arbitrarily choose on who we choose to enforce these rules that we make, and who has to follow them. And we don't have to follow them, but you have to follow them. Like, didn't like one of the senators from like New Jersey get discovered with like wads of cash and gold bars in his trunk while simultaneously criticizing Nayib Bukele, right? Like, isn't Nancy Pelosi like one of the best stock traders of all time? Like, again, like I'm not trying to be political or like whatever, but it's clear that there's certain people within the country that rules don't apply to them like they apply to everybody else. And normally we wouldn't talk about this type of stuff. However, recently it's been affecting our industry. Recently, our industry has been the one, thank you, Dr. Cruz, Senator Menendez. But recently, our industry has been the one that has been under the bullseye. Like, and so we have to speak up. We have to say something. It's not okay. We're joined back by Dr. Bitcoin. Dr. Bitcoin is back. Man, could you continue your thoughts, because it was great what you were saying.
Yeah. First off, I think they're on to me here. The second I started talking about that topic, everything just shut down. That was bizarre. But anyways, I think the point I was trying to hit on is, first and foremost, I think when it comes to Roger, there's a lot of negative sentiment towards him from the Bitcoin community, and a lot of it is warranted. Earlier, I said we were crossing the Rubicon. Part of crossing the Rubicon is having people that have never interacted with Bitcoin get the first taste of what it's like and hear stories, narratives, history. And if we are not strong in our positions as Bitcoiners, and we don't protect the narratives, the stories that are being put out there, that's what happens. You get Roger going on Tucker Carlson rather than someone that can actually tell the story of Bitcoin and be able to represent Bitcoin properly. Now, despite all that, despite our feelings for Roger, I think there is something bigger at play here, which is the weaponization of the legal apparatus against individuals. Now, when it comes to that approach, you see that often in third world countries, in countries that are dictatorships, but you're seeing a lot more in the US and a lot more in the light than it ever used to be. Particularly with this last administration, you're seeing it angle towards the now president-elect. You're seeing it angle towards anyone involved in January 6th. You're seeing it angle towards people that are involved in the Bitcoin and crypto space broadly. So when it comes to rules and regulations, if you want to steelman the argument, you would say, okay, these regulatory bodies are trying their best to protect investors or protect the average person from getting defrauded or getting scammed. And there is some merit to that to some extent, right? If you look at some of the shitcoin happenings over the last few weeks, last few years, look at the Hawk Tua coin, right? I can't believe I'm saying those words. But should that have ever happened? Should that have ever gotten out of the bag? Now, there's a libertarian side of me that thinks, yeah, absolutely. If people voluntarily choose to invest in those types of things, then it's their loss, right? They kind of know what they're getting into. But this goes to the point of informed consent. Is like, do people really know what they're getting into here? I think sometimes they do, and they're gambling, so that's perfectly fine. And a lot of times they don't. So we all draw a line somewhere. Like, if someone defrauded your grandmother with a phone scam, we'd all be like, that person should be charged, and that should be illegal, right? So we all draw the line somewhere, but where is that line? The problem is, for the crypto industry, and I'm using crypto specifically here, broader than Bitcoin, it's been a very blanket approach. So a lot of times when you have a new innovation, new technology, you have concentric circles of adoption. You have the inner circle, which is the hardcore believers, the cypherpunks in our case, the libertarian types, the gold bugs that were converted to Bitcoin. And these people adopt it because they need it, or they feel like they are drawn to it in a very ideological manner. And then that concentric circle expands to, now you look 15 years later, we have corporations, we have institutions, we have individuals, we have nation states, and so on and so forth. So for regulatory bodies like the SEC or FINRA or whoever, when they look at this, they're trying to deal with an animal that has already escaped its cage. And their approach is just a scattergun approach. Find targets where you can get them and try to take them down. So what do? They go after people that are loud. They go after people that make themselves heard. And oftentimes, these are people that deserve to, answer some questions as to what they've done and whether it was above board. But oftentimes, it's a weaponization of a political and legal apparatus. And I think that's part of what you're seeing here. And I want to be cognizant of that, and I want to warn Bitcoiners not to be too black or white. I think a lot of Bitcoiners, myself included, your instinct is to either say, it's Roger, he kind of deserves it, or we should fight for Roger because he's getting this. And I think the answer is like right in between. Is like, he probably deserves some sympathy in terms of what he's going through from a legal perspective, but he doesn't deserve sympathy in terms of the narratives that he's spun and the damage he's caused to Bitcoin. So part of that is getting the narratives right with the block size wars. We have very little information on that we can share with the public. We have a great book called The Block Size Wars, but other than that, and a few podcasts and a few conversations, I think most people that come into the space, they see Roger Ver and they see him talking about Bitcoin. They have no idea about the history. They don't know anything. So that guy goes on Tucker, that's credibility. Like, it's a boomer generation or anyone older than 30, they're looking at Tucker Carlson, they're looking some guy on there that's talking about Bitcoin. They're like, all right, cool. This guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. They're going to look him up, and all of a sudden they own Bitcoin Cash. And 5 years later, they're like, wait, what happened? I thought I owned Bitcoin.
Yep.
And that's seriously damaging. So how do we address that? I think it's a very delicate situation, but you have to be able to approach it in a way that addresses the different avenues of the conversation in a reasonable way.
I think both things could be true at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to like separate like the two. It's like, yes, as a Bitcoin community, we're not fans of Roger, but I'm also not a fan of the US government persecuting another Bitcoiner that has different, to put it nicely, I don't even know how to put it nicely actually, but I'm not a fan of the US government persecuting us or persecuting our industry, right? Like this is why I put CZ in the mix. This is why I put Arthur Hayes in the mix, right? Like CZ, built one of the biggest altcoin exchanges on the face of the planet. However, why is it that when banks do the exact same thing they accuse CZ of, they get fines? How come when, exchanges do it, like we get locked in a box? How come when, Ross did what he did, you got a triple life sentence? Like Roger is facing a life sentence essentially. Like that is nuts. And then simultaneously, I'm not going to repeat myself and beat a dead horse, but it's like simultaneously there are certain people in government and certain figures and certain politicians, not to name any names, that have done and did do the exact same things, but they have absolutely no accountability whatsoever. So
and
my issue.
Sorry, Nico. It's also important to note here, they're not going after him for securities fraud. They're not going after him for embezzlement. They're not going after him for fraud. They're going after him for taxes. So it seems like they're finding any way to pin something on him, and that seems like the most reasonable route for them.
For sure. And it was 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago, right? And again, I'm not saying that what Roger did, I don't know, and I don't have a legal background to give you an assumption of the case. What I am picking attention on is there's a pattern here that is very noticeable. Opti was the first one that was like looking at me on the show, and it's like, Nico, like stop being a schmuck, bro. They're obviously targeting us. And I continue to give the benefit of the doubt until one day I essentially broke on air and I went all the other direction. And that day was the moment they locked the Samurai wallet guys in. The moment they arrested the Samurai guys, I was like, no. And I remember tweeting out, I said, guys, honestly, it's probably not a good idea that Biden wins another term. And the tweet went viral because everyone was thinking the same thing, right? And then, of course, that created a political opportunity for the opposing party to capitalize on it. And then that's why Trump made Bitcoin part of his campaign, right? So it's kind of like we didn't want to get political. We didn't want any of this. We just wanted to be left alone to our own devices to build. We have Bitcoin, but it was kind of like you poked us with the stick for so long and you kind of forced our hand. You forced us to be part of the donor class. You forced us to become a political voice. You forced us to start inviting some of these politicians to our conferences. You forced us into that corner by the actions that you have taken. And then when we call you out on it, it's just total gaslighting. Like, I'm just, that's my opinion on all this. Anyways, guys, we still got to get to the news, and then we got to talk to Dr. Bitcoin. So let's get to it. Here we go.
I want to give a very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success.
want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your peace of.
All right, everybody. Guys, Opti is going to, that's not a phone that Opti is using. He is holding the Passport by Foundation devices. This is the perfect gift to give to somebody that perhaps is a little bit intimidated by taking self-custody. Passport does not sacrifice security for convenience. So get yourself a Passport by Foundation devices Bitcoin hardware wallet. Remember, guys, not your keys, not your cheese. Take self-custody. Use promo code SIMPLY to get a small discount. All right, everybody. So let's talk about this crazy world we live in. I'm going to continue. I have not deleted this note for the last week of doing the show because I'm going to continue to iterate that just to kind of give you guys an idea, right? Elections have consequences. We just talked, for like 30 minutes about the Roger Ver case, about Operation Choke Point 2.0, about essentially what we had to deal with as an industry and as a community for the last 3.5 years due to this current administration. Now, because of this upcoming because of this election, because Trump won, you have a pro SEC chair, you have a pro Bitcoin president. We paid you guys a video of the president's son talking about Bitcoin yesterday. You have Howard Lupnick going into the administration. He's going on Pomp's podcast, basically saying that he's planning to buy hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. Like it's like it is gnarly. So this is why we say elections have consequences. And one of those consequences is, and this isn't going to be a legal one or a regulatory thing. This is going to be something that I just find absolutely hilarious because this is something that Trump would say. I mean, he did take credit for Bitcoin hitting 100K after all. So this shouldn't surprise anybody. But basically, quote, Trump is going to be very focused on the price of Bitcoin. It's another stock market for him. Adding that Trump would love for Bitcoin to hit $150,000 in his early presidency. I find that absolutely hilarious because it was actually like during the Bitcoin conference that he was like, if you vote for me, I'm going to make you very rich and Bitcoin is going to hit $100,000. Like he said that, and it was like his Trump mannerisms and his Trump rhetoric, but he did say it after all. And I find it hilarious that as soon as we figured out that he won the election, he the price of Bitcoin started pumping. Now, in terms of moving the Overton window and kind of favorable, regulatory environment, here's the former the CFTC chair, Chris Giancarlo. And he went on Fox News and he said some interesting things that we have talked a lot about on Simply. Let's check it out.
Recently climbing more than $100,000 per. This as investors anticipate Donald Trump will usher in a new era of crypto-friendly policies and legislation during his first 100 days. What's that mean to you? Chris Giancarlo is the former chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission under Donald Trump. Good morning to you. Thanks for coming in here. Here's a Treasury document called Bitcoin Digital Gold. We've heard that before, okay? That's one element. Next one, Elon Musk praising El Salvador's Impreso crypto reserve. All right, so that's an interesting relationship. Why is this happening now? What does the incoming administration see as favorable for Bitcoin?
There's a number of reasons why this is happening. One is because the technology has come about. We finally reached the stage of the internet where we can go beyond storing information on the internet to actually storing things of value. Things of value like wealth, things of value like ownership of a home. This is what they call the new wave of the internet, an internet of value, and the technology's there. In fact, when you think about Bitcoin or Ethereum or these others, what they really are is protocols that allow us to store value on the internet, as opposed to the way we've been doing it in human society for only the last 400 years, storing value in basically an IOU from a financial institution. And as we've learned in the last 40 years, during which the internet has never gone down, banks have failed, including 3 banks of America's top 20 just in the last 3 years. So moving value storage on the internet is an idea whose time has come.
Okay, you got that?
Kind of. I'm going to ask you this. So on call for number 4, this is the number of crypto millionaires that's been surging. Okay, so I think one of the things that happens, and you had a good question to him initially, which is, what does it mean for you? Because when most people are thinking about themselves, like, well, I don't understand this stuff, so I don't know how to invest in it. One thing you said is, crypto is the umbrella. Right? Is that right?
That's right.
And then Bitcoin is one type of crypto.
That's right.
And there are lots of different types of crypto.
Exactly.
So what's a good crypto and what's a bad crypto? How do you know?
Right. So just as there's multiple protocols for storing information, there's HTML, HTTP. They all do different things. Some are good for website establishment. Some are good for email. In a similar way, different cryptos allow you to store different values. Bitcoin, which is the most widely known and has had the most spectacular success, might be the equivalent, as you said, Bill, to digital gold. In the previous world, the analog world, what cash was to gold, in the digital world, digital money may be to Bitcoin. Let me give you another example. We live in a time where 1 out of every $4 has been printed in the last 5 years. We are actively debasing our currency. And at the same time, Bitcoin has, into its design, programmed scarcity. You can never have more than a certain amount of Bitcoin. And so the dollar is depreciating, Bitcoin is appreciating. Quick factoid. In 2018, the average American home would have cost you over $260,000 and over 400 Bitcoin. Today, the average American home is now over $460,000. It would cost you less than 5 Bitcoin.
So I'm going to leave it at that and just open the conversation, like just open it up to the panel and just discuss about this. What the F is going on? What, like Doc, could you have ever have imagined this, brother, back in the 2016, 2017 era? We were in the trenches. We were saying the institutions were coming. Could you have ever imagined? I mean, that is the former head of the CFTC, basically educating the Fox anchors, number go up. This is better than owning real estate. He didn't get everything right, in terms of I don't think he did a great job differentiating Bitcoin with crypto. He could have done better there. But, what world are we living in? I mean, that sounds like Simply Bitcoin on Fox Business, essentially. What's your take, Doc? Opti's like, nah.
I think I'm muted, but so I don't think you're going to get anything more bullish on that topic than what you just got from a former CFTC chair. Like, it's not perfect, right? Like, the Bitcoiner in you just cringes a little bit when he starts talking about Ethereum and other cryptos and he doesn't differentiate. I get that. It's very instinctual. I get it as he was talking. I'm sure you guys did as well. But as a whole, you're not going to get a better bull case scenario than that guy going on Fox News with his reputation, his standing, his connections, his network, and basically just raving about Bitcoin. I mean, he was raving about Bitcoin and talking about how, its time has come. He was talking about protocol. He was talking about a lot of things that you would hear in Bitcoiner circles. Now, I think this is going to be a trend where it's very much like that. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that video. It's almost like a meme of like some guy just dancing out in a field alone, and then eventually like more and more people join, and then it becomes kind of cool to do it, and then eventually everyone joins. I think it's becoming cool to do it now, especially with the traditional financial folks. These people don't want to be left behind. They don't want to look like they are Luddites in the modern world. And one way to not look like a Luddite is to get on the Bitcoin train, understand what's happening, be an advocate for it, and say, hey, I was one of the early ones in my field, which is traditional finance, to advocate for it, to own it, to support it. I think that's what we're seeing now. These guys in the traditional finance world, they're starting to have these conversations. And let me tell you what, guys, it's shocking, I know, but I speak to regulators all the time because we run a financial platform and is registered with SEC and FINRA. You guys would not believe the amount of people in those organizations that are Bitcoiners. You would not believe it. The people that are in those organizations are individuals just like you and me, and they own Bitcoin. They talk about Bitcoin. They ultimately are waiting on the framework to meet the innovation, but very, very sympathetic to Bitcoin within the organization from very many individuals.
Absolutely, 100%, man, and I'm excited to hear more about it, and and I'm sure that a lot of what you just said motivated you into rolling out your business. You went stealth mode for a long time, my friend. You just poof, and you came back with the suit. What happened in between? I want to know.
Yeah, wait, Nico. Before we get into all that, because we're gonna give Dr. Bitcoin MD a whole 20 minutes to do that. I just want to mention one thing, guys. All I heard in the beginning was Donald Trump wants 150K day one. Let's go. I fully endorse this message. I am all with that. So January 20th, 150K Bitcoin confirmed. And then the last part that Dr. Bitcoin MD was saying, it kind of goes into what we've been saying on the show for a while, that I think everyone kind of understands Bitcoin and understands the incentives of Bitcoin, but these big mega corporations that do have, a lot of stipulations and regulations surrounding them, they just can't fully, put all their money into Bitcoin yet, but we're slowly seeing that change. And just to keep this short, because I do want to give Dr. MD a good moment. The one thing that I was thinking the whole time, Bitcoin MD kind of mentioned it, is the cringe, and I just realized we're going to come up with a whole new round of shit coining, and now it's not just coming from shit coiners, it's going to come from these suits and these regulated institutions and people with PhDs and academic backgrounds, and man, I don't know if I'm ready for all that, Nico, but it seems like we're going to get a whole new round of shit coining, and man, I'm not that excited for it, but hey, it is what it is. There's only Bitcoin. It's going to be
a shitcoin extravaganza, but
yeah.
I don't want the thing is, I don't want Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin needs any special privileges. I don't want the government to pick who the winners and the losers are. Bitcoin is a superior asset. Bitcoin's going to win on its own. Listen, look, no altcoin has made an all-time high on Bitcoin terms. Like, they could have made an all-time high in dollar terms since 2021, but if you compare that, you should be judging your net worth in Bitcoin, not in dollars. You'll see that every altcoin, at best, it's an oscillator, but it's an oscillator on the way down. So ETH had an all-time high versus Bitcoin. It hasn't broken. It's gone up and down. Like I said, it's oscillated, but it still hasn't broken that all-time high that it's made a couple years ago. It's just kind of on the way down, and everything in the world goes progressively down as it compares to Bitcoin, right? So yes, I think we're going to be heading straight headfirst into this shitcoin extravaganza, but we're protected by this orange force field of Bitcoin, right? Anyways, guys, stay tuned. We're going to talk to Dr. Bitcoin. We're going to find out where he went. He was, one of the most hardcore Bitcoin maxis on X, formerly Twitter, for the longest time. And he just disappeared. He said, peace. I'm going to focus on my health. I'm going to focus on some things. Disappeared off the face of the planet. And then he messaged me like a couple months ago, said, Nico, I'm back. You know, he's been working on a company and he shows up today in a suit. So we're going to find out what he has been working on. So everybody stay tuned for the culture. We will be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable energy. Also, gotta casually drop this in here, HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech or check out their website, hivedigitaltech.com.
All right, everybody, we are back, and I want to tell you about our sponsor, BitBlockBoom 2025. It's going to be hosted in Dallas, Texas, April 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th of 2025. BitBlockBoom is one of the best Bitcoin conferences of the year. In fact, it's the Bitcoin conference where me and Opti met in real life for the first time. So it's a very special place in Simply Bitcoin's history. The BitBlockBoom conference is the perfect conference for you to meet some of your favorite Bitcoiners and potentially to get a job in the industry. And you want to get your tickets quickly because the prices do increase over time. The next price increase is going to be in 21 days. But if you use promo code BBB21, you'll get a small discount to BitBlockBoom 2025. We hope to see you guys there. The entire Simply Bitcoin crew and family will be there. So hope to see you guys in the flesh. We will be doing the production for the conference. It's going to be a great time. See you guys at BitBlockBoom. Anyways, I want to pivot the conversation. What's up, bro? How are you? How have you been? Where have you been? How's life? Good to see you're doing well. You're in a suit. Every time I see someone in a suit, I'm assuming they're doing well. So what's up, dude?
I'm doing really well. I just want to point out that it's a sport coat and not a suit. So, not quite there yet. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. You know, I actually want to tell everyone here a story, and Nico's a part of this story. You know, most of the people in chat, most of the people that are listening know me as Dr. Bitcoin. Yes, I was a doctor. I was an academic. I dealt with that life and that path for a very long time. You know, COVID happened, craziness happened. I wrote all about that in Bitcoin Magazine. People can read about it there. I'm not going to rehash that. Eventually, I decided I wanted to leave that, and I did it with no plan whatsoever. The first thing I did was actually go to the Bitcoin conference in Miami. I believe it was 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And I was on a panel in 2021. It was about Bitcoin maximalism. And it was me, Nico, Alex Svetsky, and a Bitcoin Twitter OG that I love, Bitcoin Lurk. And Nick Hoffman was the one that was coordinating everything. And what people don't know about that is before everything started, we were all backstage. We were getting ready to go on. And we ended up getting news that Ross Ulbricht was essentially being punished, being put in solitary confinement. And we had a feeling it had something to do with all the conversations about him and freeing Ross at the conference. And so when we were backstage, everyone was just really, really upset, really, you know, it was very difficult. His mother was back there, and it was tough. It was tough scenes, to be quite honest with you. And so we went on stage. It was a little awkward. We did our best, and it was a good panel. We all enjoyed it. And, you know, now 3 years later, it's just really funny to me how life comes full circle, you know? I end up launching a company called Timestamp. I'm on a show with Nico. Nick Hoffman did an article on it for Bitcoin Magazine, and Ross Ulbricht is set to get out. And so it's just wild. This world is wild, man.
It's so freaking wild, dude. And I just want to add, like, that was my first foray into Bitcoin conferences. I've never spoken at a Bitcoin conference. And I remember seeing Alex Gladstein backstage. And I was like, dude, I'm kind of nervous. I've never spoken. Now, like, you put me in front of 30,000 people, I'll just be like, yeah, what's up? But like back then, if you hear that panel, like, you can hear my voice quiver because I was nervous. And it was my first Bitcoin conference, and they put us on the main stage, right?
Yeah.
And remember, I went up to Alex Gladstein. I said, hey, man, I'm kind of nervous or whatever. It's like, you know, like, this is pretty crazy. Like, I've never done this before. And Alex Gladstein just looks at me and he's like, not that many people do. And he just walks away. Just makes contact, and then he just walks away. And I'm like, holy shit. And then I remember what you were saying. They were playing a recording of Ross over the thing, right? Over, you know, to the main stage. And we were following up on that. And that was the panel. And the name of the panel was like, why Bitcoin maximalism is important. And one of the things that I said, which is, if you're against Bitcoin maximalism, you're against Bitcoin. If you're against Bitcoin, you're against freedom, went viral. Eric Voorhees was triggered. He was like shortly after, and it was actually quoted by the Financial Times, right? Which is nuts, right? And mind you, one of the things that Nick asked me during that panel was, he asked me about Simply Bitcoin. Simply Bitcoin had 600 subscribers on YouTube, 600. And I pitched the idea of Simply to the entire crowd, the Bitcoin 2020 or Bitcoin 2021 crowd. And I said, I have an idea about a YouTube channel. Let's use some of the tools and tactics from a lot of the altcoin channels, and let's apply it to Bitcoin. That was just an idea in my head, right? Fast forward 4 years later, right? It's like, holy gigas, what is going on here? And then, of course, all the things that have happened along the way, the ups and downs, but I think that's normal when you're building a business. And Dr. Bitcoin MD, it's the same thing, brother. You were there, and you weren't wearing a suit there, my friend. You were just like the rest of us in a t-shirt or something. And one of the things that I remember, one of our last interactions was, and it wasn't an interaction with me personally, but one of your last interactions with X was like, hey, I'm going to focus on my health. I'm gonna go full time into Bitcoin, and I'm going to work on something, and I'll be back. Usually when people say that, they never come back, right? They never come back. Either they've hit their goal. Stack, I was telling this to Opti, though, I don't care how much money you have. I'm going to be doing this forever because I love this. But you know, either they hit a goal in their head and they're like, I don't want to deal with social media anymore. I've been on social media too much. F this. And they kind of just disappear. They kind of fizzle out. Or you know, they're just kind of sick and tired of it, or it just didn't work out. You actually came back, and you came back stronger than ever, man. And this is like the perfect segue to your project, which is called Timestamp. And by the way, you can go to timestampfinancial.com if you want to check it out. So I'm just going to read this, and I'm going to pass it on to you, Dr. Bitcoin MD. So for our audio listeners, in the beginning of Timestamp on the homepage, it says, invest in founders pioneering the future. So I'm going to give you the floor, Dr. Bitcoin. What is Timestamp? Why should our audience care? What are they looking into? Is this potentially investing in Bitcoin companies? What's your take?
So I'll give you a little bit more backstory as to why I started Timestamp, and then tell you a little bit about what we're doing now. So directly after that conference, I was out of medicine, out of academia. I was taking a break from everything. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an idea as to what I was going to do with my life. But I knew one thing is I wanted to work in Bitcoin. I just didn't know how. So I tried a few things. I tried to do like a few small jobs here, a few small roles here at some Bitcoin companies that were very gracious to me. But I never found the right fit, and it was for a couple of reasons. One, I have an odd skill set, you would say. A medical doctor is not something most startups need. And two is I realized I needed to be my own boss. Very much, I like the classic Bitcoiner type. Like I couldn't work with people's visions that were not matching my own. I needed to go my own way. And I was working with some fantastic people, to be quite honest with you, and they deserve their own
Dude,
way.
I learned that the hard way too, brother. So I feel you.
Yeah. So honestly, what I ended up doing is I dropped everything. I dropped everything in my life and I moved to Austin, Texas for a bit. No plan, no job, no friends, just hanging out, going to see Bitcoiners, getting to know them. And man, it's inspiring because what I ended up doing is basically putting myself at the bottom of a different totem pole. You know, I'd spent my whole life working my way up medicine and academia to the point where I was comfortable and I was doing well from a professional standpoint. And so to go from that to starting at the very bottom in the Bitcoin world in terms of actually making it a career, that was very humbling. But I got some good advice early on, which was ask questions, talk to a lot of people, and learn. You're not here to start anything just yet. You need to learn. And that was the best advice I could have gotten. I talked to a lot of builders in the space. I talked to a lot of investors in the space. And the biggest thing I found was that there was a disconnect between the community in Bitcoin, the ones you see on Twitter and Nostr, and a lot of the founders in the space. The capital markets around Bitcoin and open source companies were lacking. If you've ever tried to raise money in this space, you realize that there's only a handful of people that you generally go to, VCs and angel investors. And once you're done with those, once those options are exhausted, you're kind of stuck, right? And so for me, I was running into so many founders that were building incredible things. And I wanted a way for them to be able to put themselves out there and be able to reach the community and have them be able to invest in these companies. Now, easier said than done, right? How do you get normie retail investors or specifically Bitcoiners involved in Bitcoin companies and open source companies? Well, I did something that I thought I would never do, is go directly to the regulatory bodies and work with them. It's like,
Oh my God, that's why wearing the suit, bro. It all makes sense.
so dude, you asked me 3-4 years ago, like, would you ever work with any of these regulatory bodies? I say absolutely not. That's insane. That's not me. But what I realized is in the Bitcoin space, there are people that build lifeboats and there are people that build bridges. There are plenty of people that are building lifeboats, whether it's no KYC exchanges or wallets or hardware wallets or what have you, right? And these people are building things that people are using, especially when they have no other options or they're desperate or whatnot. And I realized that there also needs to be people that build the bridges. And so our goal was to maximize access in this space, is to allow as many people to be able to invest in these companies as possible and for founders to reach as many people as possible for investment. So we ended up over a year and a half working with these regulatory bodies. And over the summer of this year, we actually got approved to become an investment platform for Bitcoin and open source companies that's open to all investors. So Timestamp Financial, Timestamp is an investment platform for Bitcoin and open source companies that's open to everyone, accredited, non-accredited, US, international. Everyone can now invest in these Bitcoin companies.
That's awesome, man. And we see, so like I'm thinking about like something like because he's a friend of the show too, like something similar to like what Muzz does with Lightning Ventures. Is that correct?
It's a similar idea in that we want to get as many people involved. We want to build a community. We want to be able to offer options to people. I think what's exciting with what we're building right now is that the demand, the excitement around it has been electric. We've actually already signed 8 companies to the platform in less than a few weeks. These are companies that are all over the spectrum in terms of where they're coming from. But we have 2 deals that are live now on the platform, Jippy and Cascader, that are both coming out of Pleb Lab. We have Open Agents, which has come out of Wolf, and they're backed by HiveMind, so some VC-backed, more mature companies. We have people like Sovereign, who's coming up in Q1, who is the former CTO of River that started that. And then we have also a couple that are not listed there, which I'd like to announce one of them. Alex Fetzi's company, Satlantis, will be raising on Timestamp in Q1 2025 as well. So we have a lot of companies that are coming through our door saying, this is something we want. We want to be able to reach a community of people. We want to be able to reach Bitcoiners, and we want these people to be involved. We want them to be investors in our company because it gives them an access to these investment opportunities, but it also builds a different type of skin in the game where these supporters that were once just liking and retweeting things on Twitter or saying, wow, that's cool that you're building that, can now actually be invested in these companies.
That's awesome, man. That's very, very cool. And, Svetsky's a personal friend and friend of the show. And I've been hearing so much about Satlantis. I think he first brought it up he did a presentation about it in Maleta at that Bitcoin conference over there. Shout out to Andre and co. And it was very interesting. I'm very glad to hear that that's going well, that he's going to be raising money on your platform, and it's very exciting, like from a couple perspectives, right? From like you're doing good by Bitcoin entrepreneurs. Like for anyone who doesn't understand capitalism or anything, like the world works because entrepreneurs take risks and they build things that you would like. And they take a lot of risks for that. Nothing is certain. The majority of them lose. And then sometimes some of their ideas turn out to be great products. So, the microphone that I'm using right now was that was an idea dreamed up with an entrepreneur. The camera, the laptop, the cell phone, simply Bitcoin. These things are just hopes and dreams that people come up with. And part of that process is being able to raise money. And by being able to raise money, you're able to kind of fund operations or grow operations. Then that's just kind of the way that things go, right? And just being an entrepreneur myself the last 4 years, just thinking I was just going to be, a hobby, and then, it morphed into a podcast, and then now it's morphed into a media company, and me and Opti are just looking at each other like, what the fuck? What did we do, bro? How did we do this?
Stop us?
I have no idea. Just looking back, like, you mentioned the Bitcoin conference in the beginning. Looking back, you're just like, I cannot believe how we got here. So, you're essentially not only funding the hopes and dreams of entrepreneurs, but you're potentially funding some of the latest and greatest, simply Bitcoins, or latest and greatest strikes, or latest and greatest, Bitcoin Well is a public company, so that doesn't make sense. But, latest and greatest passports, foundations, right? That are just in the beginning, the early phases, and they're just trying to get on the ground. And you're not only funding their dreams, but you're also taking a bet on them, right?
So this is something I want to touch on here, because I think this goes to why I started this in the first place. I think that, look, we're all betting on Bitcoin in some sense. We're all saving in Bitcoin. However, I think there is a next step to saving in Bitcoin. It's investing in the Bitcoin standard. Is how do you put your money to work? And there are very few things that are worth investing in that are going to either outcompete Bitcoin or offer you some type of return, whether it's monetary or not, that will make you feel like you made a good investment. So this is why I say, you save in Bitcoin, you invest in Bitcoin companies, you invest in the Bitcoin standard. These are companies that are building the infrastructure to make the Bitcoin standard possible. You have education companies, entertainment companies, you have hardware wallets, you have, new things like AI agent marketplaces that are payable in Bitcoin. These are things that are only possible if these founders get the funds to build their dreams. And so when I built Timestamp, I wanted to be very particular with how we built the incentive structures, because I believe one of the reasons why Bitcoin is what it is the incentive structures that underlie Bitcoin propel it to its success. So when it comes to Timestamp for founders, we wanted to make it extremely founder friendly. So we charge nothing up front. So a founder, even if you're fresh and new and you don't have funds in the bank account to spend on legal fees and all the setup for that, we don't charge you anything up front. We make our money on a success-based commission. And so your success is tied to our success. And we believe that pushes us to great heights together. And then for investors, Timestamp is free to join. Everyone has access to these investments. You can view the investments. And then when you're ready to invest, all you have to do is sign in and go through the investor flow. And when you do that, you can do so with relatively low minimums compared to other avenues. If anyone in the chat or anyone listening has ever tried to invest in companies before, they've often found that it's not accessible because, well, first and foremost, they don't have the funnel to the deal. So they don't get informed of a lot of these deals oftentimes. And second, and most importantly, is oftentimes these investment minimums are very high. So if you want to invest with a venture capital fund, you'll have to write a check that's oftentimes 6 figures, if not more, to be a part of that. And once you do so, the decision is out of your hands. Those venture capital firms are capital allocators. They take your money and they invest on your behalf. The reason they make their money is they're good at it, right? Supposedly, some are good, some are bad, but they take your money and they invest on your behalf. And some are great at it. And I don't think that this is an either or situation. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see companies that are raising through their community and also raising through traditional VCs and getting the best of both worlds to propel them to success.
I love that. I love that. Man, this is incredible. This is great. I love what you've built in stealth all these years. And this is incredible, man. This is awesome. Giving the people access to potentially some of the latest and greatest Bitcoin companies. Guys, go to timestampfinancial.com. Dr. Bitcoin and I have a long history. This guy's the real deal. He's a true Bitcoiner. So even though he's wearing a suit, you can't trust him. I do vouch for him.
Sport coat.
But yeah, guys, go check out timestampfinancial.com. Go give Dr. Bitcoin MD a follow on X to stay tuned with the latest and greatest that he's doing. I congratulate him on his business. That's really, really cool. Glad to hear that he's been building. And this was Simply Bitcoin Live for December 11, 2024. I'm your host, Nico. It's my co-host, Optimus Fields, and our guests for today, Dr. Bitcoin MD. We'll see you guys tomorrow for a brand new episode.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.